Hi, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to draw this super quick and realistic tiger portrait using charcoal pencils. So let's get started. So these are the art supplies I'm going to use for this drawing, and you can pause the video right here to note them down. I'm using this premium 350 GSM paper by Grupo Cordinons, which was imported from Belgium, and the drawing portion area is 14 x 18 inches. I drew the outline using grid method, and you can find the detailed step-by-step process from making grid to outlining on my Patreon profile. Link is in the description. Okay, so let's start the shading process, and I'm firstly scraping some charcoal on my scraper to convert it into a powder. If you have a charcoal powder, you can also use that instead of scraping. I started off by using a medium-sized dry brush, but a lot of powder was falling off the paper. So now I'm using my fingers to add and blend the charcoal. For the rest of the portion, I simply blended the outline, and the excessive charcoal from the outline will shade the surrounding areas very lightly. If we look at the reference image, we can see that the background is pitch black and the charcoal wasn't turning out that dark. So I shifted towards the black pastel chalk and started adding background using it. And it is turning out quite darker, just the way I wanted. Now it's time to add a base layer in the rest of the target portion, and for that I'm firstly darkening the direction lines using the black pastel chalk, and then blending it using my fingers in a circular scribbling motion to avoid patchiness. I'm repeating the similar process of darkening the direction lines first and then blending the area later on. Now as the nose is lighter in the reference image, I'm just going over the area with whatever is left on my fingers, and it will give a very light base to it. I'm going over the whole drawing and readjusting the areas which seems a little bit dull until I'm fully satisfied with the results. Now it's time to add the fur texture in the air, and I'm using my white pastel pencil with a very sharp tip and adding these small slant lines and strokes. I'm adding these strokes all along the curve of the air by keeping the length random. As the airfold is done, I'm adding depth in the rest of the air using a black pastel and then blending it afterwards. When you achieve that pitch black shade, start adding small and soft strokes along the outline of the air, and then extend them downward slightly to add a base layer of fur texture. Now as the base texture is done, I'm adding brighter strokes by keeping the pressure high on my pencil. And by the way, you can get access to our premium content and support this channel through Patreon. You can sign up through different membership levels and get access to all the outline and grid references, etc. We have an ever-growing library of hundreds of exclusive and real-time tutorials, and you will also get access to 4 new tutorials every month. You can also post your artworks in our active community of patrons and participate in our weekly critique sessions where I give my honest and positive critiques on your artworks, so you can improve your skills and get better with your drawing. Visit the link in description and become a premium member today. Moving on to the head portion, and I'm adding these small straight strokes along the outline. I'll be following a technique which I named as sandwich method, and as we can see that there are bands or lines of black fur in between the white ones. So I'm adding the white fur strokes first and creating 2 lines, leaving a section of black fur in between them. Now when the base fur for the white stripes are done, I'm sandwiching black fur strokes in between them, and I'm using my sharp tip charcoal pencil to add thin and fine strokes. For the rest of the forehead portion, I'm adding white strokes on all white areas first using pastel pencil, and then adding black fur using my charcoal pencil, following the same sandwich technique I explained earlier. Make sure to keep the natural flow and direction of fur in mind while adding these strokes to achieve realistic results. Now when we look at the face portion, we can see that the fur hair is a little bit bigger in size. So I'm repeating the similar sandwich technique, but the only difference is that the strokes this time are a little bit bigger than the strokes of the forehead portion. When this sandwich technique is done, it's time to fine-tune this texture by extending the white strokes over the black ones. I'm also adding a few thin yet random strokes in between the darker ones to mimic the fur tufts. You can also vary the pressure on the pencil to create depth and dimension within the fur. You can press harder for darker areas and lighter for highlights. Okay, so now moving on to the left eye, and I almost forgot to shade it blue just like the reference image, and I started shading it with a white charcoal first. So if you want to draw colored eyes, then you can leave this portion for now and follow the steps I will do later in this video. Now moving on to the rest of the eye portion, and I'm adding a darker base using the same charcoal pencil, and then adding some lighter strokes for the missing fur over the eyelid using a white pastel pencil. For the highlight on the lower eyelid, I'm adding a very thin yet curved stroke very carefully. This stroke will bring everything together as well as make the overall eye 3D. Now I'm adding a few strokes to fine tune the fur around the eye to give it a more natural and detailed look. Moving on to the cheeks portion, and I'm repeating the similar sandwich technique. Notice that the outermost portion has the relatively bigger strokes facing downwards and are less dense as compared to the strokes on other portions. Okay, now let's move on to the left eye, and now I'm shading it blue using my Pitt Pastel color 149. Now to add depth in the upper portion of the iris, I'm using my charcoal pencil and shading the area with a very light pressure. And for the lower portion, I'm adding highlights using my white pastel pencil very carefully. I'm going back and forth with my tools to adjust the details as required. Okay, so now let's move on to the right side of the forehead, and I'm repeating the similar process as I did for the right side. The only difference is in the directions of the stroke, so add them accordingly. Moving on to the nose, and the texture here is a little bit different from the previous one. So for the portion in between the eyes, I'm adding strokes of relatively smaller size. Also, I've divided the whole area between the eyes into two sections vertically in my mind, and I added these strokes on the left portion slightly tilted towards the right side. And then for the right side, I'm changing the direction and tilting them towards the left side. Now I'm adding a required black pattern very carefully by analyzing the reference image. Okay, so it's time to adjust the base layer in the nose, and first of all I'm adding shadows using a black pastel chalk and then blending it using my fingers afterwards. For the lighter portion of the nose, I'm adding a base layer using my white pastel pencil. You can also use white pastel chalk or white charcoal pencil if available. Now I'm blending this layer thoroughly using my medium sized dry brush. As the base is done, let's move on to the texture, and I'm using my black charcoal pencil for this purpose. I'm adding a mixture of small strokes and dots depending on the area I'm working on. The area above the nostrils has relatively denser black fur, so I'm layering the strokes here to create a required texture. Now it's time to add white fur, and I'm adding these thin strokes in between the darker ones, just like the way I added previously. Moving on to the right eye and cheeks portion, and I'm repeating the similar process as I did for the left side. The only difference is in the direction of stroke, so I'm adding them accordingly. Okay, so for the whiskers portion, I'm adding a base of fur first and creating a pattern using the same previous sandwich technique. The body is blurry in reference image, so I'm adding shorter and blended strokes as required to create a blurry effect. Now I'm using my sharp tip white pencil and adding these longer strokes for the whiskers, starting from the base and gradually flicking my pencil as I move away from the mouth portion, specifically to avoid blunt ends. I'm keeping the length and direction of the stroke random to achieve realistic results. Too much uniformity in such strokes take the essence of realism away from the drawing. Also notice that I'm keeping the pressure on my pencil variable to achieve brighter and softer strokes which help in creating a 3D texture effectively. Okay, so now let's move towards the next section, and I'm firstly darkening and shading the nostril area by keeping the pressure on my pencil. As the paper I'm using here is very smooth, so it's very difficult to layer and achieve brighter and darker tones respectively. I'm adding a blended white pastel layer with a very light pressure. And now to create some dimensions, I'm adding shadows around the outline, keeping the pressure on my pencil very low to achieve a blended look. Moving on to the right side, and I'm repeating the similar process as I did for the left portion. And for the chin portion, I'm adding white strokes of random length with a very light pressure. and then adding another layer of strokes over and in between the previous ones with relatively higher pressure. And then to further fine tune it, I'm applying higher pressure this time to achieve brighter strokes. Okay, now for the center portion, I'm just layering strokes in random directions by keeping the pressure high and flicking my pencil downwards. In this way, you will get a stroke with a wider root and very thin end. I'm filling in some spots with darker strokes to add depth around the lighter ones. Moving on to the right side whiskers, and this time I'm firstly adding directional lines using an electric eraser. And then I will add white strokes over the directional lines very carefully. This will remove the extra charcoal from the paper and will allow the white pastel to stick to it, resulting in a brighter stroke. Some details on the right side are still missing, so I'm adding them to achieve desired results. And with this last step, we are done with this super easy tiger portrait drawing. It takes so much time and efforts to create this tutorial, so please leave a like if you enjoyed this one. It helps me a lot as an artist. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.